About 12 years ago, TEDx Talks published a video on their channel titled Hip Hop and Shakespeare, Akala at TEDx Aldborough. In the beginning of the video, the speaker Akala challenges the audience with a fun pop quiz in which he tells them quotations and they have to guess whether it is from Shakespeare or from the hip hop songs. And surprisingly, audience mistakes Shakespeare for hip hop and vice versa. After the quiz, speaker Akala rightly says that it wasn't as clear-cut as many of us may have thought. The language used, the subject spoken about, various things make it very, very difficult once the context is taken away, once our perception is taken away. Something very similar to this was done by the scholar I.A. Richards in late 1920s at Cambridge. He issued a selection of poems ranging from Shakespeare to Ella Wieder Wilcox to his audience, who were requested to make comments on the poems. Though they were encouraged to reread the poem as many times, the only catch was that the authorship of the poem were not revealed. Comments made by the readers produced the book Practical Criticism, which later became a groundwork for literary theory called New Criticism. Hey there, I am Yash Purohit and I welcome you all to Literoseious. This video is a part of our ongoing series of literary theory and criticism in which we will be discussing New Criticism. In one of my previous videos, I have explained how English studies entered into the academies. I will put the link of the video so you can watch it later. For now, let us have a quick overview of English in academies, which was rather sympathetic before the rise of New Criticism. Between 1830 to 1842, French philosopher Auguste Comte published a series of texts titled Course of Positive Philosophy with an objective to extend the principles of natural science to the wider humanities. The positivist philosophy was concerned only with facts, verification, and evidence. Therefore, in literary criticism, it was devoted to studying three factors: author's life, their cultural environment, and any comment that authors may have made on their work. During this period in America, colleges majorly focused training students in medicine, law, and ministry, along with the idea of cultivating gentlemanly character in them, for which the study of classical literature was employed. Therefore, along with history, logic, theology and natural science, curriculum consisted of Greek and Latin as well, which was influenced by German philological scholarship and the positivist philosophy. English was offered as elective in last 2 years without any special regard to the design of the course. Gradually, the maxim raised that English should be studied as Greek or Latin, and hence the manner in which the classes were being taught copied as it is for the English studies. Therefore, the focus was more on philology and history than the stylistics. There is an interesting instance given in Gerald Graff's Professing Literature from Cleveland's Compendium of English Literature regarding Edmund Spenser. Cleveland's book contains the questions such as death of birth and death, in whose reign did he flourish, what is said of his parentage, where did he go to reside, who visited him there, what is Spenser's great work? Of how many books does it consist? It is just a small passage, but as you can see, it consists majorly of questions regarding the poet's life. Yes, there are a couple of questions about his work, but it only requires information from the students, who can easily pass the examination simply by memorizing the answers without ever needing to read the actual work. Ironically, this was how I had studied literature in my school days in the 21st century. And unfortunately, our competitive exams are still designed in this manner. At least that's what I believe. But that's not the scope of this video, so we'll keep it aside and go back to 1891, the year in which John Feucht, a professor at Bethel College, published an essay titled A Plea for the Study of Literature from the Aesthetic Standpoint. Feucht says that teachers should not only be teaching literary facts, instead they should be teaching the essence of literature. After not so long, in 1895, Martin Reid Sampson, the chairman of the English department at Indiana University, proposed the idea that study of literature means the study of literature, not of biography, not of literary history, incidentally of vast importance, not of grammar, not of etymology, not of anything except the works themselves, viewed as their creators wrote them, viewed as art, as transcripts of humanity, not as logic, not as psychology, not as ethics. Though no such program existed then, but Sampson sowed the early seeds of the doctrine which was later to be called New Criticism. Moving forward a little ahead to the time of the First World War, the anti-Germanic attitude developed in the educational institutes and American patriotism in the heart of the people. It threw a new light on the literary studies with the maxim of "for Americans, American literature," and therefore moved away from the age-old historical and philological pedagogy of literary studies. Period after the war was the period of great uncertainties and loss on faith in traditional values which, for literature, culminated in the formation of New Criticism. Term New Criticism comes from John Crowe Ransom's book of the same name, published in 1941. During this time, the New Criticism had taken the academics by storm, but the foundation of it, to the greater extent, lied in I.A. Richards' practical criticism, after which, in the years to follow, scholars like William Emerson, Clement Brooks, and W.K. Wimsatt emerged. In this video, rather than looking into each of them individually, we will be looking at the main ideas that they propagated, which became the main principles of New Criticism. Also, I would like to mention that in 1919, T.S. Eliot had published an essay of remarkable importance titled Tradition and Individual Talent, which we will be discussing in a separate video. In Practical Criticism, the book I mentioned at the beginning of this video, Richard's intention was to provide a new way to respond to literature, free from the preconceived notions or pre-existing knowledge, and therefore respond to the work solely on the merit of the language used. Upon receiving comments from the students, who by the way were Cambridge educated, Richards found many incompetencies in them. For instance, difficulty in comprehending plain sense of poem, difficulty in understanding imaginative and figurative language, etc. As a solution to this, Richards suggests that students should learn how language works, and for doing so, merely studying grammar and syntax of the language is not sufficient. Students must learn the kinds of meaning that language handles, their connection with one another, their interferences. For doing so, text should be treated as an autonomous entity. That is to say, the focus should solely be on the text itself without any outside interference, such as history of the period or author's biography. Attention is to be given to the form and structure of the text, which involves a careful examination of textual elements such as rhythm, imagery, symbolism, and interconnectedness. It will help with the deeper understanding of the text and will ultimately help in appreciating the artistry of the language. Another key aspect of New Criticism comes from 1946 essay written by Wimsatt and Beardsley titled The Intentional Fallacy. Intentional fallacy means confusion between the poem and its origin. A literary work does not take birth by itself. The work is of course produced by the intentions of the writer, but that intention is the cause of the work and not the standard by which critics can judge the work. Furthermore, it is impossible to find out what the writer intended by his writing. The intention of the writer can only be understood by the produced work. If by studying a poem, poet's intention are not revealed, then the poet has failed to accomplish the only aim of the poem, and therefore it does not make any sense to look outside the text which itself failed to reveal the meaning or the intention. A poem should not mean but be, writes Wimsatt. Intentional fallacy in a nutshell means interpreting poem by its causes, which New Critics does not allow. After about 3 years of publication of essay Intentional Fallacy, Wimsatt and Beardsley published another essay titled Affective Fallacy in 1949. While in Intentional Fallacy they tried to take away the limelight from the author, in Affective Fallacy they tried to get rid of another villain who interferes in interpreting the text, that is to say, the reader, or more precisely, the emotional response of the reader. The main argument is that judging a poem based on the emotion it evokes in the reader leads to the subjective judgment and therefore distracts from achieving objective analysis of the text itself. We can take instance of pulp fiction, which are often filled with intriguing plot that makes it an ultimate page-turner. But the artistic value of the book cannot be judged by such a virtue. Therefore, the only way to appreciate the literary text is by analyzing the language, form and structure as a self-contained and self-referential objects. Another key aspect of New Criticism comes from T.S. Eliot's essay Hamlet and His Problems. Eliot writes, the only way of expressing emotion in the form of art is by finding an objective correlative. In other words, a set of objects, a situation, a chain of events which shall be the formula of that particular emotion, such that when the external facts which must terminate in sensory experience are given, the emotion is immediately evoked. In short, by objective correlative, Eliot refers to set of events that evoke certain emotions by using symbols that represents those emotions. Eliot writes that Hamlet is dominated by an emotion which is inexpressible because it is in excess of the facts as they appear. Therefore, Eliot considers Hamlet as an artistic failure because Shakespeare failed to adequately represent Hamlet's complex emotion and inner conflicts by means of symbols or situations that represents the same. Eliot further contrasts it with Lady Macbeth, where Shakespeare masterfully uses objective correlative to show the guilt and remorse that haunt her after the murders she and her husband have committed. For example, the famous sleepwalking scene of Lady Macbeth represents her chaotic state and loss of rationality. By reading the scene, we can easily understand her emotions of guilt and remorse. I am not sure whether Akala had the idea of new criticism in his mind when he gave that talk, but certainly he gave a remarkable instance of how our perception interferes our response to the work of art. But once the perception is taken away, it leaves us with nothing but the language to rejoice, and therefore I believe it does not matter is it Shakespeare or Eminem, as long as it touches your heart and moves it. More often than not, new criticism is characterized as the branch of literary theory that focuses solely on the text. But instead of text, I would rather assert the focus is on the language, the very essence of literature, and the way in which it is employed. By following the principles of new criticism, I believe that an ideal reader can differentiate between an eternal piece of art that stands the test of time and the popular pulp fiction that stands on the bookseller's top list. My attention here is not to demean any form of writing, but only to distinguish between the eternal and temporal form of pleasure, and the new critics are trying to help us in rejoicing that pleasure. The ultimate choice is ours.